Since the publication of her first novel 32 years ago, Jodi's been turning out stories that have resonated with millions of readers and have often made their way to the bestseller list. She's up now to more than 24 novels and 5 plays, plus 2 young adult works co-written with her daughter, Samantha Van Leer. Her books are known, among other things, for exploring such controversial issues as gun control and abortion rights, and her new novel, By Any Other Name, addresses a matter that's particularly personal for her, gender discrimination in publishing, or to put it another way, how women have been written out of history by the men who've written it. The book also reflects doubts that Jodi shares with quite a few others, that William Shakespeare wrote all the works attributed to him. What if maybe there was a woman or two who behind some of those plays? And we'll get to that, I'm sure, in this evening's discussion. So Jodi's constructed a spirited parallel narrative that follows 2 women centuries apart. There's Emilia Bassano, who's an actual historical figure in the 16th and 17th century England, who's a female playwright unable to get her work in front of the public. She agrees to let a man publish her writing under his name, and that man, in Jodi's telling, is, you guessed it, Shakespeare. Now fast forward to the present day, and there's a character named Melina Green, a descendant of Emilia's, and an aspiring playwright. She's written a play about her ancestor, Emilia, but can't get it produced in the male-dominated world of Broadway. The play ends up winning a contest after being submitted under a male pseudonym, forcing Melina to decide whether or not to allow her identity to be removed to ensure her work gets performed. In both instances, women are denied rightful credit in a prejudiced world and must determine the price that they will pay to satisfy their desires and ambitions. Should a writer do whatever it takes to see her work live on? Jodi at least has made sure with this very thoughtful, clever, and moving book that the name Emilia Bassano will be remembered. Now in conversation with Jodi will be Angie Kim, who has gained well-deserved recognition for her writing. She started out as a practicing attorney, then turned to writing novels, and has made it onto the bestseller list with both her first and her second novel. Her debut book 5 years ago, Miracle Creek, is a murder mystery that also speaks to the challenges of caring for special needs children and the lengths parents will go for their kids. Her second novel, Happiness Falls, which came out a year ago, again combines a thrilling plot with an exploration of neurodiversity and its effects on family dynamics. Please join me in welcoming Jodi Picoult and Angie Kim.
Okay, yes. Yours? No. Huh. Well, that's unfortunate. Okay. Here. All right, I'm gonna get started because I'm gonna try to get this water off. We spilled water. Well, not we, I spilled water. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you so much to Politics and Prose and to Sidwell Friends. And thank you so much to Jodi for being here the day after the publication of your 29th novel.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo, congratulations. I'm so excited. I'm Angie, and this is such a huge honor for me to be doing this because I'm such an admirer of not only your writing, but just of so many of the things that you have done, so many of things that we're going to get to talk about tonight, so I'm really excited about that. But before we get started, I thought it would be fun to share a couple of things that the audience might not know that I thought was really hugely impressive when I looked up and I was like looking around on your website and things like that for tidbits to share that might not be in your official bio. It wasn't that hard to find, so I want to set expectations kind of low. But number one is, I thought this was really cool, that you're in the top 10 of Princeton's most influential living alumni.
It's only cool when you realize that Michelle Obama is also one.
Well, no, okay. Hello, I'm sorry. Can you read, it said along with Michelle Obama, so you stole my punchline.
I just knew that. I was like, oh my God, I'm on a list with Michelle Obama.
Yes,
what?
exactly. And because we were just talking about her amazing speech in the green room. So that was very, very cool. Number two is that you wrote 5 issues of DC Comics' Wonder Woman, which I think is very cool. I was a huge Wonder Woman fan even when I was in Korea, so it reached all the way over there. And then number 3, and this is very personal to me, which is what a generous supporter of other writers you are. So I wanted to say, like, officially, and I think this is in your official bio, and the audience may have heard, we were trying to listen in, but we couldn't really hear because of the acoustics, so I'm not sure. So forgive me if I'm, repeating, but you are a patron of Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, which is given to female fiction writers, and it's like the biggest purse as far as literary awards go. So that's very, very cool. And then I wanted to tell a personal story of how we met. Okay, so she doesn't know me. Last summer, this was and I'm looking at my phone because I need to, I took a screenshot of this earlier today. So she doesn't know me. This is like a month before my second novel, Happiness Falls, comes out. I get a message on Instagram, and it's from Jodi Picoult, and it says, "Hi, Angie, I'm a writer." And I was like, unless it's a writer whose name also happens to be Jodi Picoult. And my friend, bookseller Melody Green, passed Happiness Falls along to me. So this was the arc because it hadn't come out yet. I loved it. I didn't know if you need or want a blurb, but here it is, just in case. And she proceeded to write the most amazing blurb and send it to me. I freaked out. I sent it to my editor and my entire team, and they were kind of like, "Are you sure that this is the right person? How much have you had to drink tonight?" And I was like, no. And then, but nobody said anything. And then, like, a couple hours later, my editor did come back to me and said, "Okay, so I did talk to her her editor, and she apparently did right there."
It really was me.
But
honestly, if you haven't read Happiness Falls, all of you should be doing that. It's very easy to write nice things about an excellent book.
Oh, that's so. But I mean, for somebody like Jodi to do that, and also just the how humble you were, just saying, "Oh, I'm a writer," as if I wouldn't. We don't all know who Jodi is. I mean, it was.
I do that all the time. Like whenever I slide into someone's DMs like that, I always say, "Hi, I'm a writer," because I do not assume that anyone knows who I am.
Well, but even so, I think that just goes to what an incredible person you are, which is one of the reasons why I feel so honored. Not only because I'm getting to talk about this incredible book with you, but because you're just such an amazing person, I'm getting to actually meet you for the first time. I'm so happy. Okay, all right, so quit
enough
fawning.
fangirling, let's move on.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so by any other name. All right, so it launched yesterday. Great acclaim, many, many great recommendations. But one of my favorites is from Elle magazine, which called this book an inspiring work of feminist literature, which I thought was so badass. I loved it. And then Jojo Moyes said that this is your best book yet. Now, this is your 29th novel. So to hear somebody say that, like, this is your best book yet, and all these people saying, like, you're getting better as a writer, your prose is like just singing and lyrical, and, you know, like all of these things that people are saying and raving about you, how does it feel? Like, does it kind of like, by your 29th time, are you like, oh, whatever, or
it's like,
does it still feel?
I shouldn't admit this because my son is here tonight, but it is like having a baby, and you get excited every time you see a new baby. It doesn't matter if it's the second or whatever, the third. Yeah. I mean, I have to say that publication day is always super exciting. This book is a little different for me.
Yeah.
Why? Well, I became really obsessed with this book. Yeah. So we couldn't hear you out there, so I can give you my elevator pitch.
Yes, definitely, please do.
So this is a book about how women have been written out of history by the men writing it. It's about women's voices being silenced in the past and still today. It follows two women, as I know you heard, one from 1581, who has to borrow a man's name because she can't put her own work before the public, and that man's name that she borrows happens to be William Shakespeare. And it's about her descendant, who also is trying to get a play produced on Broadway in a very male-dominated field, and can't do it under her own name again. To me, what I love about this book is that it is a page-turner. It is historical fiction. It is by far the spiciest thing I've ever written. Sorry, Jake. And it also, to me, is the timeliest thing I've ever written. And the thing that blows my mind is I've written a lot of timely books, right? Yeah. This is about Elizabethan England.
Yeah.
Half of the book takes place 400 years ago. Yeah. But we are living in a time when women are still fighting for their rights, and when a very small group of people who are banning books are deciding what stories should be told, who gets to have them, and who gets to write them. Yeah. So we are literally reliving history right now.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And so, in a way, this came out like at the perfect moment, in time. The other reason I think it means so very much to me is because I do write about lots of controversial issues, but I'm rarely living them myself. And this is a book about how female storytellers are judged differently than male storytellers. And that is something I have experienced. Yeah. I bet you've experienced
Definitely.
it. I keep telling people I'm going to be on literally a different plane every day for the next month.
Right.
And what's going to happen is I'm going to sit down and my seatmate's going to say, "What do you do?" And I'm going to say, "I'm a novelist." And then they're going to say, "Oh, do you write children's books?" Yeah. And I'm going to say, "No." And they're going to say, "Oh, do you write romance?" "No." "Do you write women's fiction?"
Like
what is women's fiction?
Exactly.
Why do men get fiction, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I keep thinking, I don't understand why in 2024 we are still pigeonholing women into where we feel that they need to fit.
Yeah.
That is not right, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
And it's gender discrimination, and it's been something I've talked about in publishing for many, many years.
It is.
So for me, this book was absolutely a no-brainer.
So tell us about the origin story of why you decided to, write this, why Shakespeare, why, and how you kind of came up on that idea, because this is something that's so personal to you in some ways.
So, as you all heard, I was highly overeducated at Princeton, and I was an English major, and, like all other English majors, I fell in love with Shakespeare. What did I love about it? I loved the writing, and I loved those characters, those female characters. Proto-feminists like Beatrice and Rosalind and Portia and Kate, and nobody else was writing these three-dimensional women at that time. So that was what I latched onto. And maybe as an English major for 5 seconds in a seminar, my professor might have said, there's a question about whether Shakespeare wrote all his own plays. And all of us English majors, we were like,
You like
"Oh,
rolled
that's
your
so
eyes.
stupid."
Yeah, exactly.
You know, totally not buying it. And I didn't think about it for years. And then a few years ago, I was reading The Atlantic, and there was an article by a woman named Elizabeth Winkler called "Was Shakespeare a Woman?" And in it, she looked at the authorship question, and she said something that just literally stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
Shakespeare had 2 daughters that survived infancy. He did not teach either of them to read or write. They signed with a mark. And I went, nope.
Yeah.
No way the guy who created those proto-feminist characters
Yes.
didn't teach his own girls how to read.
Yeah.
So I had never heard of the woman that she began to write about named Emilia Bassano, a real-life historical figure.
Yeah.
And I wound up doing this deep dive after I read this article and trying to find out all that I could about her life. And the thing about Shakespeare, if you've ever studied it or listened to academics, is there are a lot of gaps in his life. And for years, academics have twisted themselves into knots trying to explain away how Shakespeare could have written some of these plays with all these gaps in his life and experience and education. And without even trying, Emilia's life very naturally, seamlessly fits all of it.
Right. So, like, I was completely blown away. There is, by the way, for those of you who haven't read the book, which I am guessing
think is
is
all
like
of
all
you,
of you.
yeah.
No, maybe like 99%.
I mean, they got the book like 5 minutes ago.
But there is an amazing author's note by Jodi at the end that you must read. I don't know, like there are some people I think who are like, oh, those acknowledgments, those like things, you know, at the beginning and at the end, we just want to focus on the story. No, because I feel like your author's note does such an incredible job of contextualizing for us not only why you found this so fascinating, which makes me fascinated, but also it helps us to understand what in the story is based on historical fact, which I think like gives a lot of credence, even though it is fiction,
Right.
to the historical, like the history part of the historical fiction.
Right. So if it's okay, let me tell you a little bit about some of the base facts that we know before I go into it. Okay.
I was going to ask you about that, but I didn't know if you
No,
wanted
this is
to.
all good.
Okay.
I mean, I could talk about the author's note, but I don't want to talk about that till they know who Emilia is.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, great. So, all right. So here are the things that we know about Emilia Bassano. Everything we know about her comes from the diary of Simon Forman, who is this academic, he's an astrologer / hack doctor. He's not an academic at all. He is
Basically like a psychotherapist almost.
not even. Like, this guy, like, read your star charts to tell you medical stuff. And the thing is, he existed, and Emilia went to him because she had had multiple miscarriages and wanted to have another baby. So she decided he was her best bet. So his diary is in the Ashmolean Museum, so you can all go and read it if you want to. And he did very religiously take down everything that she said to him in all of their sessions, including the fact that he tried to sleep with her multiple times, and she said no, and he was mad about that. But anyway, so what we know about Emilia all comes from those diaries. We know that she came from an Italian family. She was, her family were very musical. They lived in a town called Bassano del Grappa, Italy, and they played the recorder beautifully. Henry VIII came and heard them and thought they were so amazing, he brought a whole bunch of Bassanos back to England to be the recorder consort for the king. When he died, they became the recorder consort for the Queen, Queen Elizabeth. So Emilia grows up in this family that is performing all the time. They were all hidden Jews. They were Jewish, but they were not allowed to show their faith. When Emilia was 7, her dad died, and she winds up becoming the ward of a countess, which is pretty common for the time. But this countess was really ahead of her time. She was a proto-feminist, and she decided Emilia should have a full classical and legal education. Not normal for girls, absolutely not normal for a girl who wasn't of the nobility. So Emilia gets this brilliant education because of it. At age 12, that countess gets remarried. So Emilia is kind of like thrown into limbo. And she winds up living for a year with the countess's brother, a man named Peregrine Bardi, who was the ambassador to Denmark. And the summer that Emilia lived with him, he did take a diplomatic mission to Denmark. He met the king and the queen. He met Tycho Brahe, who is an astronomer whose ideas are all over the Shakespeare plays, including the very first scene in Hamlet where the supernova is his discovery. And he also had dinner with this astronomer's cousins, who were named Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, just coincidence. Anyway, so then the next year, Emilia
And also the castle.
Yes, they
right?
were in the castle.
They were in the castle.
Kronborg
that's
Castle.
Like, yeah.
Right. 13 years old, Emilia can't live with this guy anymore, so he winds up she winds up being forced into being the mistress of the Lord Chamberlain of England. So she's 13, the Lord Chamberlain is 56. Love that reaction. And the thing is, the Lord Chamberlain was in charge of all theater in England. So through him, Emilia would have seen every play that was written crossed his desk and was censored for treason. He would have gone to rehearsals. He would have gone to opening nights. He would have known every producer, every playwright, every actor. She absolutely would have met all of those people while she spent 10 years at court with him. But then she got pregnant at 23. You couldn't have a pregnant mistress living in your house. So she got married off to her wastrel of a cousin, a guy named Alfonso Lanier, who was a terrible human being. And she wound up at age 23 with a baby, a husband she hated. She had to support her family. How was she going to do it? We don't know anything else about Emilia until 1611, when she's in her 40s, and she suddenly becomes the first published female poet in all of England. Now, that is a tremendous achievement. All of you should know her name just because of that, right? But nobody knows her name. And it was my belief that published poets, especially female published poets in the 1600s, they don't just appear out of nowhere. She was obviously writing before that. I just don't think she was doing it under her name, right? So now let me tell you a little about the gaps in Shakespeare's life. So just like you know certain things about Emilia, there are certain things that you know about Shakespeare and that you don't know. Here's what we know about the guy. He was a producer, he was a businessman, he was an actor. We know that he evaded taxes twice. We know that he had multiple colleagues take out restraining orders against him. We know that during a famine, he bought up all the grain in Stratford and he jacked up the price so his neighbors had to pay more. Now, I just want to say, we're in DC. I'm going to let your mind think about some other businessman who practices might be like that. Yeah. Anyway, we also know that Shakespeare never played an instrument, but there are more than 3,000 references to music in the plays. We know that he never left the country, but he was able to write about places like Italy and Egypt and Denmark with great detail, like, for example, where the closets are in the Queen of Denmark's bedroom, okay? Like, not something you'd find in a guidebook. We know that he was not educated formally at Cambridge or Oxford. We don't even know if he went to, like, grammar school, which is fine. He could have been self-educated. But when he died, he didn't own a single book at all. And it wasn't like there were libraries that he could have gone to for information. He would have had to amass books to write what he was writing about. And we also know that when he died, not a single other playwright of the time said anything about him dying, like, oh man, that's a bummer, because he was definitely the best known playwright of the time. We know that when he died, he was not buried in Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey, although a lot of people you've never heard of made it in there. Yeah. Here's one thing we don't know about Shakespeare, that he wrote a single line of anything with his name on it. There is absolutely no proof, no handwriting, none of that. Right? So when you think about how Emilia's life intersected with that, you begin to see places in the plays, again, where she just fits.
So one of the things that was really interesting to me is just both in your author's note and in the, in the story itself, you talk about the idea that, William Shakespeare, the man, he was also an actor. He had like a full other job, so it would have been incredible. Like, he was incredibly prolific.
Right.
And so he would have been basically writing all the time when he
would
was
have had
doing
multiple
anything.
jobs. He was a producer, he was a businessman, and he was an actor, and he wrote 38 plays by himself. Oh, and he would have been the only playwright to not collaborate, because they all collaborated back then.
Right. And then also just the idea that maybe it's not just one person, but several people or a group of people who were all hiring William Shakespeare Shakespeare because they, because of their position, because of their nobility or whatever, could not actually go ahead and reveal themselves to be the authors of these plays. I thought that was fascinating.
It's really cool. I should also say that if you have never read Shakespeare, if you're not a total English nerd like I am, that's okay. You don't need to have read any Shakespeare to enjoy this book, because I am going to guide you through it. It's okay. But if you do love Shakespeare, then you have a whole treasure hunt where you can find all the references. So yeah, you're right. And that is one of, I don't think Emilia Bassano wrote all of his plays. I think she wrote some of them.
Yeah.
And I think that I've made a pretty compelling case for it. But I think in reality, there was like one puppet master who was kind of corralling a bunch of writers, kind of like James Patterson today, right? Like with multiple writers actually doing the work. Yeah.
Yes. Which is really funny that you say.
I mean, where's the lie?
'Cause it's true.
Right?
It's totally true. I
Okay.
have friends who've been, who've been
exactly.
asked and approached to see, do you want to be, one of the writers that, he employs.
Oh, I can talk about my author's note now, too.
Oh, yeah. Okay, do
I
that.
wanna do that. So you mentioned the author's note, which I had to give you all this information from
Sorry.
this dump.
Yeah,
This
it
is-
was supposed to be later. It's just I got so excited about it.
We get excited.
Yeah.
This is the AV portion of the evening. Okay, so I told you about Emilia, and her life was pretty tragic. Like a lot of times in her life, she was knocked down. She wound up going from extreme elite culture into abject poverty. Every single time she got back up, she outlived everybody she loved. I mean, she really had a lot going on. And I really wanted to give her a little joy. And I was writing fiction, ultimately. So I was like, I'm going to give her a love affair. And I decided that I was going to create this grand romance for her. And this came out of, again, history.
Yeah.
So another fact that we have about Emilia comes from when she's in her 50s. After her terrible husband died, thank God, she finally winds up
It was really horrible.
she winds up expecting money from him for a patent that he owes. But her in-laws, her brother-in-law, steals all the money. So what does she do? She takes him to court and she represents herself. Again, mind blown, right?
Yeah.
So she's in court, she goes through this whole trial, and at the end of it, out of nowhere, the Earl of Southampton comes walking into the courtroom and goes, I am not the magistrate here, but if I was, I would rule in favor of her. And then he leaves. Now, if you know anything about like English social structure, no, that would not happen. There is no way an earl, a very famous rich earl, would have just walked into a commoner's courtroom and interceded on their behalf. So I was like, what on earth is this? And then I thought, when she lived with the Lord Chamberlain for 10 years, they would have known each other. Court was really small. She absolutely would have met the Earl of Southampton when he was much younger. And he was about 3.5 years younger than she was. And, she was living with a guy who was 56. Maybe she wanted to have a little fun on the side.
And also, you mentioned that he's
a hottie.
very,
Yeah.
very handsome. Exactly.
Apparently,
he's such a hottie.
for the time, he was a hottie. I'm going to preface this because you're going to see some pictures. Okay, so...
And then you're going to be like, what?
Yeah. Anyway, he looked like me. He had like a long curly red hair. So, so after I finished writing the book and I write this tragic love story, because we all know Emilia's never going to wind up with this guy because he can't ever marry her, I then go to the Victoria and Albert Museum when I'm in England. And the picture of Emilia that is believed to be her miniature is in the archives at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Okay, so that's our first slide. Oh, look at you, Emily. You're killing it. All right, so this is Emilia. This is what she looked like. She was supposed to be quite beautiful as well. I don't know. Whatever. She's pretty. This miniature was painted by a very famous artist named Nicholas Hilliard. And he did a lot of miniatures, as a matter of fact. And I was so excited to get to see this and to get to hold it, which is the next slide. Look at me, look how happy I am. Yeah, there I am holding Emilia. I mean, it was like really. Angie, can you imagine
No,
you're
I
writing
love
about
that.
her and there she is,
I know,
right?
I know.
It was amazing.
It's just, seriously. And this next part, I'm just getting
okay.
chills.
It's getting
at
really
you.
good.
I'm getting chills already.
So, my eye keeps getting drawn to the case where all of the Nicholas Hilliard miniatures are. Next slide. Okay, so you can see there are lots of miniatures that he did, right? And almost all of them are on this beautiful cobalt blue background. I keep looking at the guy next to Emilia.
Yeah, I think he's kind of hottie, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, who's that? So, next slide. This is the guy. And so a couple of things. The archivists tell me this is an unknown man. And if you look at him, he has a black field behind him, and his hand is kind of slipped in over his heart. And they told me that absolutely would have been the decision of the person sitting for the portrait, because portraits back then were kind of like puzzles for other people to figure out. And so what they believe is that this signifies despair, great despair and love.
And you mean the black background?
The black background and the fact that he's
also
covering
the
his heart.
Yeah.
But also the fact that it is painted on the 6 of hearts playing card. In early Elizabethan cartomancy, which is like the forerunner of tarot,
Right.
the 6 of hearts symbolizes the soulmate card, the person that you love that you will never be with because fate is going to intervene. So they tell me this is painted the same year as Emilia's portrait, roughly, and they're like, we don't know who it is. And I'm like, I think I do. So I pull up on my phone the next picture. This is the Earl of Southampton 4 years after that miniature was painted. And this painting is an accredited one of the Earl of Southampton. They know it's him. And it was, mind blown, also painted by Nicholas Hilliard, the same painter. More interesting is the fact that this one is painted on the 3 of hearts. That, in cartomancy, means somebody has entered our relationship that's going to tear us apart. Now, in 1594, in my fiction, I have a scene where Emilia is beaten so badly by her abusive husband, she literally has to crawl to Southampton. So that's exactly kind of resonates with what I was writing. So I am blown away. The archivists are blown away. They want to go back and do research. I want to go back and do research. Next slide. I find this dude. This is a painting of Southampton at the exact same age of the person in that oval, same year. And you can really see the similarities, like the thin eyebrows and everything. It's by a man named John de Critz, that's the artist. And I send this to the archivists, and they send me back a 30-page document after several months saying that they've done all this provenance on this particular miniature, and that yes, they believe it very well could be Southampton.
Oh my
Last
God.
slide. So, for over 200 years now, Emilia and Southampton have actually been side by
seen each
side
other.
in this case at the
Yeah.
V&A. And I think it's because of me.
I think like the writing gods gave you this great gift that when you were looking for that bit of happiness
Yeah.
for her,
Yeah.
that they kind of like gave you this idea of like, why not make it
Right.
this guy? And you didn't realize that they were actually, in fact, next to each other,
Yeah.
possibly in real life, certainly in their miniatures, right? In
Yeah.
this, I mean, I just got chills when you talked about that. I'm not normally like a woo-woo kind of person in real life, but I am when it comes to fiction writing.
Angie, you should have seen me. Yeah, I totally get it.
Totally.
Totally.
I mean, I had something
Yes.
like, I had things like this happen with
This-
my stories.
This
that,
literally
like,
kept happening. I want to hear
Yeah.
your story too. What happened?
no, it's too long and
Okay, you'll
whatever.
tell me
I'll
later.
tell you
Okay.
when we're having drinks later. I don't
But
wanna,
like that
no,
kept happening.
We're talking about this, yeah.
To me,
no,
over
exactly.
and over with
Yeah.
this book.
No,
Like,
no, totally.
That's why I can't quit her. You know,
No,
like I just
absolutely.
I feel so passionate about her.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
also,
feel like
how many
this
people
is
want me to
just-
go home and write political fiction tonight? Right? Maybe I can make things happen.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know. Right?
No, I don't
Yeah.
know. Okay, yeah, I'm not really into that idea as much as I really feel like you just tapped into like
was
the
amazing.
truth. Like I really do believe that there's like a 90% chance that she in real life did have this torrid love affair with him.
You know, it's
like
funny
with
'cause
Henry. I
when-
really do.
When you're writing historical fiction,
Yeah.
sometimes I think as a writer,
Yeah.
you start to see connections
Yeah.
in ways that other people have never put them together
Totally.
because their lens is focused differently.
Exactly.
So like when I was writing Wish You Were Here, I was doing a lot of research with people who had been put on ventilators during COVID
Yeah.
and what happened, if they survived, and what happened, and the hallucinations they had. And when I was doing this research, like 85 to 95% of the people I interviewed, and it was a big group, had these hallucinations that were very vivid, that they truly believed was like an alternate reality.
Right.
And I was like, when I was doing these over and over and it kept coming up, I was like, I think I'm the only person in the world who knows this.
Yeah.
Because people were trying to find a cure and people were
Right.
trying to find a vaccine and
Right.
like there were really important things going on.
Right,
Nobody
right,
was
right.
talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
these
yeah,
decisions.
yeah.
You know, but that's kind of what I mean. Sometimes I think our lens is focused differently, and
No,
so
absolutely.
we can pull threads together that other people haven't seen.
I really think that you like captured something, and it makes me so happy because the thing that I will tell you about reading the historical fiction side of the story is that I just fell in love with her so completely. So even if you took away the entire premise of, Shakespeare and what she wrote, just her life story
Yeah, she's
was such
great.
a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like felt so invested, and I wanted her I desperately wanted her to have that bit of happiness.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that you gave it to her. You know what I mean? Even though she's,
Yeah.
like,
I think it's
this
like
is fiction.
I think the reason I'm connected to it, and I think the reason a lot of people are connected to it, is because I think a lot of women understand what it means to be fighting all the time.
Right.
And
Right.
that's something that we feel today.
Yeah.
It's something she felt back then. And
Absolutely.
so when you see Emilia doing it, I think it just it rings some kind of note inside you.
Yeah.
Saying, I've been there too.
No, absolutely. And I think that the other thing that it may be, you know what, actually, I did want to actually ask you about something else, but I'm now noticing that we don't have that much time. So I'm going to go to the modern day
Okay, great.
version of the story, because I think that's really important. When you were telling us about the origin story, you were telling us about, finding out about Shakespeare, reading the Atlantic story, all of that sort of stuff. So where during that process did you say, you know what, I don't want to just tell her story. I don't want to just tell the historical fiction.
Yeah.
I want to sort of marry it with something that's going on right now, something that you're experiencing. Was it like you recognized your own sort of struggles in her story, and you wanted to
I
kind
think
of like
for
give
me-
it that lens too?
We were talking a little bit about this backstage. My husband actually read the whole historical section before I wrote any of the modern section. And he was like, why aren't you just publishing this? Yeah. And I think I could have. I mean, it
Oh, you
certainly
totally
is a
could have.
standalone story.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the story I was trying to tell. Yes, I was trying to tell Emilia's story. But what I was really trying to tell was a story about how women have been standing on the shoulders of other women for years, and how even now, we are experiencing the same things and the same judgments that she experienced.
Right.
And so the other part of that was that I have had the great privilege to work in theater now for 10 years. I love writing for theater because it completely invigorated my love of writing in general. It was just like a reset.
I love that.
Yeah, and I love it because you get to collaborate, you're working with other minds,
Yeah.
very different from novel writing. When Melina tries to pitch this play about her female ancestor, she's told a lot of things. She is told, this play is too small, it's too emotional, it's theater for young artists, nobody wants to see a girl's coming of age on stage. Everything Melina is told in this book is something I was told to my face when I was working on Between the Lines, which was the first musical adaptation that I wrote.
And when was that? Tell people when that
I
was.
started writing it 10 years ago. So 2014 it began, and in 2022 we finally got the play off Broadway. And mind you, I was being told nobody wanted to see a girl's coming of age story when there were 2 men's coming of age stories on Broadway that season.
Right. Well, I mean,
but it gets better.
There's so many.
80% of tickets for Broadway are purchased by women. So where is the hang-up? Well, the hang-up is in the gatekeepers, and in Broadway, it's with the guys who own the theaters. There are only a handful of them. There are a bunch of old white men. Yeah. And so what they want to see are their stories replicated on stage. And what that means is that we don't get to hear other voices, even though all of us would love to see other voices on stage. Black stories, brown stories, queer stories, stories about people with disabilities, women's stories, all of those stories matter. And because there is someone who is literally controlling what gets to be on a stage, we don't always get to hear them.
I mean, I think when I first started reading that story, Mel's story, Melanie's story, I remember checking to see is it supposed to be in the modern times? Because in publishing, in law, in management consulting. Like, I've had so many lives. In all of them, there are definitely gender disparities, but I feel like it's subtle, right? It's like it's in, for example, it's not in saying, well, you're a woman, so you can't like write, a novel. It's more in, you know what, here's the advance, and then you find out that somebody else who has exactly the same sales that you do might get a bigger advance or something like that, or calling something women's fiction and something, something else literary fiction, things like that.
And in theater, it's if you are a female creator, of which there are nowhere near as many as male creators,
Right.
first of all. But if you are a female creator and you dare speak about this in public, you are problematic. Nobody will work with you. And
Yeah.
I had a Broadway actress, who I will not name, but who read this book and texted me and said, I can't stop crying. Everything in this book are things I can only talk about with my therapist.
I can't, because that's the thing. I can't believe that this is still going on, because some of the stuff that's happening in the theater world to this character, to the contemporary character, is just very blatant. I mean, it's really blatantly like we only take this person, this director only works with male playwrights.
Right.
So if you enter in, you might as well just withdraw right now because he's the judge. Like,
Yeah.
I was just like, does that still happen
Yeah.
in the modern day? I can't believe that. It's like, it's outrageous.
Yeah, and it's like the dirty secret that people aren't talking about. But yes, it does happen. And has it gotten better? Yes. Is there parity yet? No, there is not. The other thing that happened, which is kind of interesting, is that I didn't realize this until after I finished writing the book, but I actually made the exact same decision that both Emilia and Melina had to make. When Between the Lines was in development,
Yeah.
our producer said to me that, and I should say that I was writing that show with my
Okay.
co-librettist, who super good friend, other half
Yeah.
of my brain, great. We
Right.
work great together. And I was 100% involved in the writing of that. But our producer felt that because I had written the source material book, that it wouldn't be taken seriously if I was listed as a co-librettist. She thought that it would be seen as a vanity project. So she said,
my God.
let's not put your name as a co-librettist. And I was like, okay, because it mattered more to me that it get on
made.
stage,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So we got to opening night, which took 8 years.
Yeah.
And playbill comes out, and my name's on it as writing the
Yeah,
novel,
yeah.
but not as writing the libretto.
Oh.
And, I would still make that decision again. It didn't feel great.
Yeah.
And after the play closed off Broadway, my co-librettist went to his attorney and said, this is not right, this is not fair,
Yeah.
I want her name on it. And now, when the show is being licensed all over, I am listed as a
Oh, that's
co-librettist.
great.
Yeah,
I'm
and it feels
glad.
so much
Yeah.
better. But that's my point. Like, there are a lot of people who don't want to even entertain the thought that someone other than Shakespeare wrote those beautiful works of art.
Yeah.
But what if someone did? And
Yeah.
what if we haven't been giving them credit?
Yeah, no, and I think that the idea, the theme throughout that, does it matter whether the name that's on the work, or does it only matter that the work is out there? I think for me, it was less the name itself, but just the identity, like knowing that a woman was writing these stories,
Yeah.
and somebody who was Jewish was writing, The Merchant of Venice. Like, it puts a totally different lens on it, and I would want to know that. And so it's less the name, because, I do feel for her and all that, but she is dead, all that kind of stuff. But for women, for the female playwrights, for the female writers of today, I think it matters a hell of a lot,
I
you know?
agree. Can I give you another Emilia
Yeah,
example?
of course.
Can I just give you a taste
Yeah,
of why
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take Othello. If you haven't read Othello, it's called The Tragedy of Othello, The Moor of Venice. It's set in Italy. It's about a black man married to a white woman, and he's got major rage and jealousy issues, and he kills his wife. There, you don't have to read it now.
No, you should still read it.
So there's this line, the villain is a guy named Iago, and there's this line where he's talking to Othello, and he uses this really weird collection of metaphors in like literally 2 lines. And he uses a monkey, a goat, and a woman who represents truth. Okay, doesn't mean much until you know that Emilia's family, as I told you, lived in a town called Bassano del Grappa in Italy. In Bassano del Grappa, there's a big square, and there's a fresco that's very famous, which contains a monkey, a goat, and a woman fashioned to be truth between two doorways. That's cool, right? What if I told you that there were two apothecaries on that square? One was called the Moor. The other was run by a man named Otello. Oh, but wait, I'm not done. So
Seriously, like her whole book is like this. It's fascinating.
there are two versions of Othello. There's like the original version, which was published in the first quarto, Shakespeare's first quarto. And then there is the final version, we could say, that was published in the first folio. And there are a few years that pass between them. What happened in those years? Well, 160 odd lines were added to Othello, and also Shakespeare died. So we know he did not write those lines. Literally, the guy's underground, okay? Someone wrote 163 lines.
Yeah.
Where did those lines go? Almost exclusively to Desdemona's servant, and they are part of a soliloquy that is widely considered to be the first feminist soliloquy in theater, because it talks about how women have the same passions and anger and revenge thoughts that men do, and how they've learned that from men, and why men should be terrified. And the woman, the character who speaks those words, the name of Desdemona's servant is Emilia.
Isn't that so cool? See, like, don't you
That's
just get
one
chills?
example, just one. I mean, there's
Those
millions.
chills. Like, that's why you cannot skip reading her author's note. Okay, so I'm looking at the time and kind of panicking because I'm like three of my own questions in. All right, okay, I'm gonna actually go to the audience questions because I was told I have to do that. Okay, all right, okay. So, but I actually, luckily, they're awesome questions.
Right.
And I want to hear the answers to them. So, okay, so I love this question so much. It's from Jane. Your previous book, Mad Honey, was co-written with Jennifer Feeney Boylan.
Yes.
Did you learn any strategies or did you make any changes to your writing habit, style, process after the co-writing experience? And I would add on to that, like your collaboration with the co-librettist too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I write for theater, it's a very different feeling. And I don't know why, but writing with Tim McDonald, who's the guy I work with, I trust him implicitly, and I know he trusts me. So when we're in a script together online, we're at different parts of the script, often writing something. Every now and then we will like role play the dialogue. We make really good teenage lovers. He's also very married and very gay, so it's great.
Yeah, so it's fine.
You know,
It's safe.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. But it's just, it's you know, we work very seamlessly together. Working with Jenny was really different because Jenny, I'm a plotter. I don't know about you. Do you plot your books?
I don't. No.
Oh, God.
No. I'm sorry. I can't. I want to be a plotter. I want desperately to actually outline everything.
Wait, how?
I think it would be
like
so effective. Like, I think it would be so much more efficient.
Stop.
No.
Angie.
Yeah.
Your books like have like twists in them. How do you not plot these?
I don't know. They just come to me as I'm writing them. And then once I'm done, like during the revision process, of course, I'm like, oh, you know, here's what's happening. And so I outline as I'm going along, and then I have like a one-page outline after I'm done with my first draft, and then I can look at it, and then I can like do a proper outline. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Yeah, okay, well, sadly, that is my process, and this is probably why I have written 2 books at the age of 55, although I didn't start writing until 40.
Okay,
and
that's
you
fair.
have written 29, and you're like a couple of years older.
So Jenny operated a lot like you.
Yes.
Jenny writes like 5 drafts of a
Yes.
chapter before she knows where she's going.
That's me.
Well, I'm like, we don't have time for this.
Okay, well.
Plus, as I told Jenny, she was like, you know, I don't think we shouldn't plot it. I was like, we're plotting this book. And she was like, no. And I said, we're writing a mystery. You can't get to the end and say, I don't know who did it.
That's what I did, and I wrote. I wrote things that people consider to be mysteries. At least one of them people do.
I'm like breaking out in hives. I just can't.
Okay.
So the answer is no. I can't say I learned anything from Jenny, but I like to think she learned something from me.
Yes. So you did. So you forced her to.
I did. I forced her to do
You know
it.
what? I would love to collaborate with you.
All right, well, there you go.
Like,
There
maybe
we
you
go.
can like hammer it into me and teach me.
I mean, there was no other way I could do it. And she actually, I think she appreciated it because I also dropped the bomb on her that her sections would be going backwards in time. I was like, you can do this. It's really easy. It's not easy. You know, but that's why I made her do it. So I think she knew that she wasn't just going to pull this out of a hat.
Right. No, definitely. I think that when you're collaborating with somebody else, I think you almost always have to. I'm doing some TV show adaptation work right now, and like I love this idea of like being in the writer's room and like collaborating together, and you do have to, you know, like actually outline. Otherwise, like you don't know what you're gonna write, and like how can you all be writing?
Especially if you're writing for TV.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so all right. So Leanna asks, speaking of plot twists, the plot twists in your book are iconic and always unexpected. How often do you think of a twist before or early in the writing process versus it coming to you in the middle towards it? Can you talk a little bit about how you come up with these ideas as well?
I think we can all answer this question based on what I just said.
I mean, I think so, but still.
I know my twists before I start writing.
You do?
I do. And
Wait, but you don't know like the twist before you. Do you know? Do you see?
Yes,
I'm
I do.
trying to like get her to teach me.
Absolutely.
And,
No,
you
I'm
know,
not,
give me tips.
You know, but I don't. I should. First of all, I don't have to teach her anything. She's a terrific writer. Second of all, I think this is actually really important for anyone who is a writer out there.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter how I write. What matters is what works for you, and that's part of the discovery process. So for me, I want to know the twist because I need to be able to leave breadcrumbs for you, so that after you finish the book and you go back and reread it, you're like, oh, can't believe I missed that. You know, because there's nothing I hate more than reading a twist and like being like, well, this came out of nowhere.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because to me, like the difference between to me, a satisfying plot twist is when you think you know exactly what's happening.
Right.
And to me, this is very important. You have to not only know where it's going, but you have to actually think that that's a good idea. Like you're like, oh, this is such an awesome book. Like this is such an awesome story. This is what's happening. I know what's happening. And then the twist comes and you're like, well, I was totally wrong.
Right.
It's something different and this is even better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
but also the placement of the twist is really important for me. So like Mad Honey has a massive twist in the middle.
Right.
Wish You Were Here has a massive twist in the middle.
Yeah.
Massive. Mad Honey also has a big twist at the end. So like that was a double twist.
Yeah.
That sounds like an Olympic dive, doesn't it?
I love double twist.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why I think I do plot them out in my head in advance. What is a mystery to me is how I get from page one to the twist.
Yeah. No, I just really, really love that you kind of like know the whole thing before you go into it. Okay, so let's see. So Stephanie had asked about writing for theater. Has that changed? And so you already talked about that a little bit, but one aspect of her question, which I think is really interesting, is what about the like youth theater, the YA novels, the musical adaptation of the YA novels, things like that. Does that change anything about how you write for like the, you know, like adult fiction?
No, it's just, you know, it's different. You have to know who your audience is, I think. And like I write fiction for adults. I'm not pitching my books for YA. There are different strictures when you do that in publishing anyway. And so I guess the answer is it did matter for Between the Lions. When we adapted that book was billed as YA, but that was only because middle grade didn't exist yet. Yeah. It really is a middle grade book. It's very sweet. It's a cute little series, a duology. But when we wrote it as a show, we really wanted it to be a show that adults would come to and that they could bring kids to. Okay. So we didn't want it to be kiddie theater. And so there are a lot of jokes in there that people like kids won't get, and that's totally fine.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's good, you know, because there are other things that if you come with your 12-year-old, they'll be laughing at or whatever.
Yeah.
I think my favorite joke in there actually was one that Delilah's mom says to her after she's worried about basically a mean girl at school, and the mom says, Delilah, mean girls are inevitable, like the way a strapless bra winds up becoming a belt. Right? So
I love that. That is so cool.
So the best part of that was every night in the theater, every woman would crack up.
Yeah.
And then any man would go,
Yeah, no, as you were saying that, seriously, I was like looking at
great.
some of the men,
Yeah, they're like,
and they were like straight faces,
no.
like,
Your
okay,
girlfriends and
whatever.
wives can tell you later.
No,
Yeah.
whereas we thought it was hilarious. Okay, and then these are kind of related. So Daniel asked, what book of yours would you like to see turned into a Broadway musical? And then, I'm gonna, because we're, I'm trying to be efficient. Carl, no. And then Morgan and Lauren asked, are there any of your books that you would like to see made into film? And how involved in that process would you like to be this time around? And you've had like a number of books that have been turned into like TV movies and things like that. And of course, there was, the huge
The great
movie.
colossal tragedy
Yeah.
of My Sister's Keeper.
Yes.
So
Cameron Diaz,
to
all that,
answer
you know.
the first question, the show question first, I actually, I was talking about this with my son before, and what I would, honestly, the show that I would like to see on Broadway is Between the Lines, because we got so close.
Oh,
But we were on off-Broadway, and it was, you could not have had worse luck with the musical, because we were supposed to open a month after COVID started. We came back to New York in 2022. Our entire cast had COVID, so we had no previews. We had, I think, one preview. It was just a disaster of a time to be on Broadway, or anywhere near Broadway. So I would like it to have a fair shot.
Okay.
And it's a terrific show, so I just don't feel like it got a shake. But I would also, I've actually talked to my writing partner about turning this into a show, because all of in the middle of the book, you'll see there are pages from Melina's script. And I told him, I'm like, hey, guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna write these pages. And he was like, okay. So we would read each chapter and write one page. And it was funny, because he kept saying, don't think I haven't noticed that it's the man who's not credited this time. But we had a really good time doing that. So it would be fun to create that play, actually.
So the play that you would be creating would be the
By any other
intertwining. I mean, no, but by any other name that she's writing in here.
I don't know.
So
it might be a play within a play.
Elizabethan play.
I think it would probably be both, and it would be, be very Hamlet, wouldn't it? A little play within a play.
Very,
I don't
very
know.
cool.
I mean,
I love that.
I just think that would be kind of fun too.
Yeah, no, I think it would be really, really fun.
As
I
for
kept on
movies-
thinking about it.
I know. I've had people say, like, can I read the whole play? And I'm like, no, it does not exist.
Sadly.
But for movies, Hollywood is in a really weird place right now.
It is.
Really weird. You would think after the writer's strike that things would have like jumped back up, but nobody is buying anything. It's it's a really weird time.
It's very
So
strange.
all of my projects that were set up to go before the writer's strike are still sort of hanging around, like waiting.
Yeah.
Because all the executives are afraid they're going to be fired, so nobody is pulling saying, yes, let's do this. So Wish You Were Here is still in development. Book of Two Ways is still in development. And I actually think, I really have high hopes for that. The guy who is the showrunner for Outlander is going to be the showrunner for Book of Two Ways. And he's wonderful.
That's amazing.
It's a good transition, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
And let's see, the other one is Small Great Things, yes. Remember that?
Oh,
Small Great
yes.
Things. Small Great Things has been in development since 2016. Kill me.
Oh, my God.
What I literally, the week before I left on book tour, the producers asked me to rewrite the script
Oh, wow.
in 2 days.
Oh, my God.
Which I did.
You did?
Yeah.
You are a superwoman.
Well, also because the
You
script
really are.
needed to be better.
Okay,
So,
but still,
But
like,
anyway,
the fact that you were
that
able
was
to.
like, you asked how much creative control you have. That was a moment where I had a lot of creative control. But the really funny thing was the producers were like, do you know how to write a script? Do you think you can do this? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, I've been writing musicals now for 10 years. It's not that different. In fact, it's harder to write a musical.
Oh,
So, yeah, it's a different format in your
course,
screenwriting software. So I, of course, like immediately did it. And then the producer writes me back and he's like, wow, this actually was good.
This actually was,
I was
good.
like,
actually.
Thanks, you can send the
Really?
check to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, it was just Who knows what'll happen with that, but I know they're still behind it, and I really hope we see that one day.
Okay, good. I hope so. Well, okay, so then let's see.
You're doing great.
I think I know. I think we've gotten almost everything. Okay, I'm going to do one last question, because I think it's the only audience question that I got sent that I haven't read yet, which is Carl's. Your courtroom drama is so well written. Did you have any formal legal training?
Well, I'm so glad you asked this, because my son, who's visiting with us tonight, he is a voting rights lawyer for the ACLU.
Woohoo!
Yeah, we should clap.
Thank you for doing great work.
Okay. You guys, that just warmed my little mom heart, so thank you. But for years, like when Jake was in law school, I would call him and I'd be like, I need to know this detail about a criminal case. And he would keep telling me that he was not studying criminal law. And I would say, I'm paying for this education. Surely you can find out what about criminal law.
Exactly.
And I am happy to report that he usually did find out about criminal law.
Absolutely.
But the cool thing is that I've done so many of these at this point.
Yeah.
And even before Jake was, when he was really little, I was working with judges and attorneys, prosecutors, defense attorneys, to make sure that I was accurate in what I was writing, to the point where actually when I had to do the rewrite of Small Great Things, I was like, this is not how a trial goes. You can't put this on screen. People are going to laugh you out of the theater.
Right.
And
That's
then I, of course,
hilarious.
called Jake and said, I'm right? And he said, yes. So, I do not have any legal training. Do I think someone should give me an honorary JD? Yes.
Yes. Well, you already have honorary doctorate.
I do. This would just
degrees
be like
from-
another one, right? Yeah, whatever.
From University of New Haven and
Dartmouth.
Yeah. Yes. See, I've memorized
You
the
are
bio.
really good, Angie.
I
It's
am
a little
really-
scary.
Yeah, right? I'm going to give myself a little pat in the back.
You should.
Okay, but I'm going to end with this. There were so many other questions that I wanted to ask you about, point of view and voice, things like that. But I think that we should end by asking you two things. One is, what do you hope that readers get out of this book? And can you share anything with us about what you're working on now?
Yes.
For later,
So,
because you want to whet our appetites a little bit.
So what do I hope readers take away from this? Two things. I hope everyone knows Emilia Bassano's name. I really feel like I'm a one-woman PR campaign for her right now, because I just want everyone to know who she was. No matter what you believe, like you said, about Shakespeare,
Yeah.
I just think she deserves to have her moment in the sun.
Yeah.
So that's my big hope for this
Yeah.
book. And maybe, if a couple of English teachers are like, oh, well, let me tell you about Shakespeare, I would not be upset.
Yeah.
But that's really important to me. And I also hope that, again, I know a lot of people who come to my events have read many of my books, for which I am incredibly grateful. If you really want to know, who I am and what matters to me, this is the book to do it with. This is the book of my heart. I feel like 29 years of my career have been leading to this moment. So I'm really, I just am obsessed with this story.
I love that.
True, it really
I love
is.
that.
So, to the point where when my editor wanted to send me an editorial letter, I got so upset that she called me and she was like, okay, I can see you're a little attached. So I'm just gonna tell you the places that I had some issues and you figure it out, yeah, I'm sure everyone thinks I'm crazy. As for what I'm working on next, the next year will be a lot of theater for me, actually, because I kind of bounce between the two. So I've also had the great privilege of being on the team that has adapted The Book Thief as a musical. And we are very excited because that is going to the West End in 2025 in England. Why is it going to the West End? Because it's about a young girl's coming of age, and I can't get it to Broadway. And we also are working on an adaptation of the book/film Austenland, which is very funny, very fizzy. Yeah, if you know it, it is so funny. You guys will love it when it gets to the stage. So I'll be spending a lot of time in England doing that. But the book that I will be writing next, which will come out in 2026, is actually the year that is the 25th anniversary of 9/11. And I wanted to write about that, and I'm not going to tell you much about it, but I will tell you the origin story of this book.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
So, does anyone know Post Secret? Do you remember that Tumblr blog? Yeah. So it was a Tumblr blog, then it became an Instagram or a website, then an Instagram handle. It's basically like people send in postcards that are anonymous to this P.O. box, and they take pictures and they put them up. And you tell your deepest, darkest secrets, which can be anything from every Friday when I come home from work, I take off all my clothes and I walk around naked till I go to work on Monday. Or like, my husband doesn't know our third child is not his. It could be anything, right? So anyway, one day I read this Post Secret that said, everyone who knew me before 9/11 thinks that I'm dead. Oh. That's what I'm writing about.
Oh, wow.
That's a really good reaction too.
Now I
Thanks,
want
guys.
to.
Yeah.
Now
That's
I
awesome.
want to go look up that note to see
Right?
what else there is. You know?
So what makes you
So
disappear?
interesting.
And more to the point, what would make you come back?
Yeah. So interesting. I love it. Okay, can you please write that
Now? No.
Can you share the outline with me? Since you probably have the outline, so I can find out what happened.
That's great.
All right, well, thank you so much for
Thank you,
being
Angie.
here the day after your pub day.